Once upon a time, there lived a man who everyone called Mr. Smelly Mouth. His name was Tayo Ogunremi, and he owned a popular car stand in Lagos. Tayo was such a good businessman, rich, popular and outgoing, but heaven knows that talking to him was like sentencing your nose to death. The smell from his mouth was not ordinary. It was a mixture of expired beans, sewage and rotten eggs all in one. People struggled to listen to him because even when he was making so much sense, the odor from his mouth made it hard for them to concentrate. Tayo was a very proud man. He knew how to flaunt his wealth, and people endured his stench just because of what they stood to gain. In 2 years, Tayo had been in a relationship with more than 7 women, none of whom lasted more than 2 months with him. In fact, one of the women only dated him for a week and found herself in a hospital. The poor girl held her breath for far too long that she lost her consciousness. The worst part was that Tayo did not know of his terrible mouth odor. No one had the guts to tell him, and Tayo believed that people avoided him because they were too intimidated of him. He believed that people envied his confidence, not knowing that they were actually protecting their own nostrils. Sometimes, customers would run away in the middle of a negotiation, and Tayo would call them jobless time wasters who had nothing better to do. What he did not know was that his breath was the reason why they all ran away. In fact, one evening, a serious fight broke out in front of his car stand. 2 men were dragging themselves on the ground, punching, shouting and tearing their shirts in anger. A huge crowd gathered, cheering and recording as the men fought themselves. Tayo rushed out of his office shouting. He approached the men, urging them to stop, and to the shock of everyone present, the men stopped fighting. One looked at the other, dropped his fist as the other began to cough and wave his hand in the air. Before anyone could blink, the 2 men left the scene peacefully as the entire crowd stood there in shock. Someone whispered from the crowd saying, "Wait oh, did this man's mouth odor just end the fight?" Everyone burst in laughter as Tayo returned to his office, chest out, proud of his leadership skills. What he did not know was that it wasn't his authority that stopped the fight. It was his mouth that did what no one else could do. One afternoon, a popular politician approached his car stand to buy some cars. Tayo, as usual, came out smiling as he exchanged greetings with him. "Good afternoon, sir," he shouted happily as he stretched forth his hand to shake the man. The politician smiled politely and informed Tayo that he wanted to buy 10 exotic cars. Tayo, too excited, began to speak, and within seconds, the man's smile disappeared. His face changed as he coughed and stepped back, unable to withstand the foul smell. The man whispered to his assistant to take over the negotiation, but Tayo, oblivious to what was happening, leaned in to offer him a good discount when the man shouted that he did not need any discount. "Just give me 10 cars," he said as he told his assistant to remain and discuss the details with Tayo. Tayo opened his eyes in shock to see how quickly he closed the deal. He called himself the smartest marketer, not knowing that the politician did what he did to survive. Tayo continued to live his life, oblivious to the fact that his mouth smelled so bad. One day, a beautiful woman named Cynthia came to the car stand to meet with him. Cynthia was tall, light-skinned and had extremely long lashes. She wasn't there to buy a car. No, Cynthia had heard that Tayo was the best car dealer in Lagos and that he was filthy rich. And when Cynthia held filthy rich, she made up her mind to be with him. Her friends warned her sternly, but she refused to listen. "Cynthia, that man's mouth can peel paint off a wall," they said to Cynthia, who smiled proudly and said to them that money had its own perfume. That day, she walked into his car stand smiling sweetly, ready to trap her target. However, when Tayo saw her, he nearly collapsed to the ground unconscious. Cynthia was extremely beautiful. She was unlike any woman that he had been with in the past. Tayo could not hide his excitement. He approached her with a smile that could melt 1,000 hearts. However, when he opened his mouth to speak, Cynthia's soul left her body for 2 seconds. The smell hit her so hard that she almost saw her village people waving at her from the other side. But Cynthia held her breath like a professional diver and smiled through the suffering. "Good afternoon, sir," she said, tears forming in her eyes. "Would you like to test drive our new model?" Tayo asked, moving closer, but Cynthia took 3 steps backwards as she almost tripped and fell to the ground. Tayo quickly rushed to her rescue as he saved her from falling. By the end of the day, she had agreed to go on a date with him, not because of love, but because her greed was way stronger than her nostrils. As she left his car stand, her friends called to check how it went. "Baby girl, how was it now?" one asked as Cynthia coughed twice before answering. "It was successful, but please, if I die, you tell the world that I died for the money." The next evening, Tayo took Cynthia to the most expensive restaurant on the island. Cynthia wore a tight red gown that hugged her curves. She forced a smile as she watched Tayo's eyes sparkle as he began to confess his love for her. The smell hit Cynthia's face like a gas leak. Her eyes watered instantly as she almost ran out of the restaurant. Cynthia desperately wanted to run, but the thought of the good life that he could provide for her made her to stay as she listened to his endless compliments. "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." Cynthia smiled weakly as she looked him straight in the eye and said that he was the most unforgettable man that she had ever met. By the end of the evening, Tayo had fallen head over heels in love with a woman who was only after his money. Cynthia knew how to pretend, but Tayo, on the other hand, was not a good judge of character. Within a few months, Tayo proposed, and Cynthia said yes to his proposal, not out of love, but because of what she stood to gain. According to Cynthia, it was better to cry in a Ferrari than cry in a downfall bus. Their wedding came, and it was so massive that so many people came to see the woman who finally agreed to marry Tayo. The reception hall was filled to the brim with musicians, socialites, and people who came to confirm the rumor. When the pastor said to Tayo that he may now kiss the bride, the whole congregation leaned forward in suspense. But before Tayo could move, Cynthia began to cough profusely that her bridesmaid had to rush her to the restroom. Everyone knew why she did what she did, but Tayo stood there worried, hoping that his wife was fine. That night, inside their hotel room, Tayo professed his love for his wife. He made a vow to her to always protect and put her first. Tayo gave his wife an expensive car as a wedding gift. She moved into his mansion, and Tayo took good care of her. He loved her with all of his heart, but Cynthia did not love him a bit. She began to unleash her terror towards him, yelling angrily whenever he opened his mouth to speak. For the first time, Tayo heard it from his wife that his mouth stank. It happened one evening after he had surprised Cynthia with something special. He had spent the whole day planning it. He bought her favorite perfume, cooked her dinner by himself, and even decorated the dining table with candles and roses. Tayo wore a white shirt, his hair neatly trimmed, and he smiled proudly as he stood beside the table waiting for her. When Cynthia came downstairs and saw everything, she froze. There, standing in the middle of the dining room, was her husband, the same man she mocked with her friends, now holding out a gift box with tears in his eyes. "My love," Tayo said softly, "you've brought light into my life. I may not be perfect, but every day I thank God for giving me someone like you." Cynthia's heart melted a little. She wasn't expecting this kind of kindness. She walked slowly to the table, pretending to smile. "Thank you," she whispered as she opened the gift box and saw a diamond bracelet inside. "You deserve the world," Tayo said, his eyes glowing with love. Then he leaned forward to hug her. That was the moment it happened. The smell, it hit her like a slap of heat. Sharp, heavy, relentless. Cynthia's expression changed instantly. She could not hold it anymore. She pushed him back slightly, covered her nose and shouted, "Tayo, please, enough. I can't do this anymore." Tayo froze, confused. "What do you mean?" Tears welled up in her eyes, partly from the smell and partly from guilt. "Your mouth," she screamed. "It smells horrible. It's been smelling since the day I met you. I can't breathe when you talk. I can't eat. I can't sleep. I've tried, but I'm dying here." Silence filled the room. The candles flickered weakly. Tayo stood there, staring at his wife like a child who had just been told that he was adopted. For years, he had been laughed at, avoided and ridiculed behind his back, but hearing it from the woman he loved broke him in a way that no insult ever could. Tayo quietly sat down, his eyes blank as he stared into the distance. Cynthia did not care. She returned to her room, leaving him there in tears. Tayo did not sleep that night. He stayed up thinking about his life as some memories came rushing back. Memories of the times when people reacted to his smelly mouth and how oblivious he was to it. The thoughts broke him into a million pieces as Tayo decided to do something about it. He went to the bathroom and spent hours brushing. Tayo brushed in a way that he had never done before. He checked his breath and was happy with the outcome. Hours later, Cynthia woke up to find Tayo making breakfast for her. Still gentle, still loving, pretending not to remember all the harsh words that she said to him. He tied an apron around his waist and was singing softly as he flipped the pancakes. The aroma of the fried eggs filled the air as Cynthia caught sight of his wide smile. "Good morning, my queen. I made breakfast for you," he said proudly as Cynthia walked towards the dining table. She forced a smile as she looked at Tayo, who looked so innocent, like a child who had finally won his teacher's approval. Cynthia sat down quietly as he served her breakfast. "Taste it, my love, I made it myself," Tayo said excitedly as he pulled out a chair and sat next to her. Cynthia hesitated for a moment. She could already feel it, that invisible wave of doom crawling towards the table. The air shifted as her nostrils twitched. That same old familiar scent, thick, suffocating and persistent, slowly began to rise. Tayo noticed her silence and leaned closer. "Is it too salty?" he asked sweetly as Cynthia coughed and dropped her fork. "God, I beg, what kind of mouth odor is this?" she said to herself as she walked out of the dining room disgusted. Tayo sat there confused. He spent an hour that morning brushing his teeth and could not understand how Cynthia would smell anything after that. He smelt his breath but couldn't perceive any foul odor in his mouth. Tayo sat in silence, his heart heavy as he wondered if God had personally decided to make his mouth a weapon of mass destruction. That evening, when Cynthia returned to the living room, she found Tayo sitting on the floor, surrounded by different kinds of toothpaste and mouthwash bottles. "What's all this?" she asked coldly as Tayo looked up with red eyes. "I just want to be free," he whispered. "Tell me what else I can do." Cynthia sighed, shaking her head. "You've done enough," she said dismissively and walked away. But Tayo was not done. The next morning, Tayo drove to the hospital. He met 3 different doctors that day and explained everything, begging for help. The doctors ran tests, examined his teeth, gum and throat. Hours later, one of them came out with a puzzled expression. "Mr. Oguremi," the doctor began carefully, "we found nothing wrong with you." Tayo blinked, confused. "Nothing wrong?" "Yes, your oral hygiene is perfect. No infection, no decay. Your breath is completely normal." Tayo looked shocked. "Normal? Doctor, if my breath is normal, then why does my mouth stink?" he asked the doctor, who had no medical explanation for it. Tayo returned home confused. His wife Cynthia avoided him like a plague, as all she did was text him her demands. She moved into a separate room and even bought a special set of cutleries for herself. Tayo became so withdrawn and quiet around people. The once proud man, who loved to show off to the world, retreated to his office and barely spoke to customers directly. His assistant did all the talking, as all he did was approve the sales. Tayo, who once filled rooms with laughter and loud conversations, had now become a shadow of himself. He barely smiled anymore. He barely spoke. He just sat quietly behind his desk, staring into space. A wealthy man whose confidence had been silenced by shame and confusion. At night, when Cynthia slept in her separate room, Tayo would sit alone in the living room, brushing his teeth over and over again until his gums bled. Sometimes he would whisper to himself, "God, if this is a punishment, please let me know what I did." But no answer came. One Sunday morning, While sitting alone at the car stand, one of his old friends, Kunle, came to visit. Tayo poured out his frustration to him, asking why Kunle never told him about his mouth odor, and Kunle told him that he did not know how to say it. "I thought you even knew," he said to Tayo, who narrated all he had done to get rid of it, but still, the odor had refused to go. Kunle listened to him painfully and suggested that he consult a powerful seer who people claim to be so powerful. Kunle narrated how the seer had helped so many people that he knew. He assured Tayo that his problem would be a thing of the past once he pays the seer a visit, and Tayo made up his mind to go. By morning, he set out to the remote town of Igodo, where the seer lived. Tayo drove for a few hours but was unable to locate her address. He stopped by the roadside to ask for directions when suddenly a huge truck ran into his car by the side of the road. Tayo was rushed to the hospital as the doctors did everything possible to save his life. His wife, Cynthia, was notified of the accident. Instead of rushing to his side, she remained home, hoping that he never returns. Tayo lay unconscious in the hospital for weeks. His body was bruised and his once perfect smile was now swollen from the impact. But when he finally opened his eyes, the first words that came out of his mouth shocked the nurse beside him. "Take it off," he said repeatedly as he pointed at a ring he wore on one of his fingers. Tayo struggled weakly, his voice hoarse. "Take it off, please. Take it off now." The nurse glanced at his hand, a thick gold ring with a strange black stone, glinting faintly under the light. The ring looked old, but yet perfectly polished. She tried to pull it off, but it refused to come off at first try. The nurse tried again, and after what felt like forever, the ring slid off his finger. Tayo fainted again and woke up hours later to realize that the terrible smell had gone. What he did not know was that the ring was responsible for the smell. Tayo's father years ago made the ring to improve in his business. The ring was no ordinary ring, as he gave wealth, but in return took away something so dear to the wearer. Tayo's father, though successful, never knew peace in his lifetime. He suffered from one sickness to the other until he finally died a painful death. His son Tayo, oblivious to what his father had done, took the ring as a reminder of him, not knowing that doing so was the beginning of his own nightmare. Tayo never took off the ring. He wore it every single day, in the shower, in bed, even while eating, because he believed that the ring brought him luck. But unknown to him, the ring carried a dark covenant that bound its wearer to wealth through a curse. After the accident, whilst Tayo was unconscious, he had a dream where his father appeared to him to warn him about the ring. Tayo stood in complete shock as his father narrated how he got the ring and how the ring led to his untimely death. Tayo could not believe his ears. "You mean all these years I've been carrying your curse?" he asked his father, who nodded his head and revealed to him that the only way to be free was to destroy the ring or allow another take its curse. Tayo woke up in the hospital drenched in sweat. The nurse helped him take off the ring as Tayo decided to keep it in a safe place. Weeks passed and Tayo remained in the hospital, receiving treatment. His wife Cynthia never called or visited. He was discharged a few weeks later and returned home to his wife, who barely showed any form of compassion towards him. Tayo ignored her completely as he kept to himself. He barely spoke, and his wife Cynthia did not even care. She was plotting to leave him and needed access to his room to steal valuable items. Tayo overheard her conversation one night. He stood quietly in the hallway, listening as Cynthia spoke on the phone with her boyfriend. "Baby," she whispered, "just give me a little time. I'll find where he keeps his valuables. Once I have them, we'll disappear together. That man is useless now. Always quiet like a ghost. I can't stand him any longer. I'm done," she said as Tayo's heart broke. However, he did not move. He simply closed his eyes and sighed. He had already lost everything once. His pride, his confidence, his marriage. But that night, he made up his mind that if Cynthia wanted wealth, he would give her wealth and all that comes with it. The next morning, Tayo began his plan. He took the gold ring and locked it in a small wooden box in his room. As Cynthia walked past his room, Tayo pretended to be on a call. He spoke loudly enough for her to hear from the hallway. Yes, yes, he said, pacing back and forth. Those items are my life's treasure. The ring especially is priceless. My father gave it to me before he died. Those boys tried to steal it from me at the accident site. I was so lucky that they didn't. So, I've decided not to wear it for a while because I don't know how I will ever live without it. In fact, I've kept it in my room until the coast is clear. Cynthia froze behind the wall, listening. Her eyes lit up like fire. A priceless ring hidden somewhere in his room? Tayo continued. No, no, I can't sell the ring. It's the secret to my wealth, passed down from my father. Once a person wears the ring, they will be surrounded by wealth, he said on the phone, as Cynthia began to plot how to steal the ring. That night, Cynthia could not sleep. She tossed and turned on the bed, her mind racing like a thief rehearsing her route. The secret to his wealth? She thought. That ring must be worth millions, maybe billions. She smiled wickedly in the dark. Tayo, you stingy fool, she muttered under her breath. You thought you could hide money from me? You'll see soon enough who's smarter. The next morning, Tayo acted normal. He hummed softly while eating his breakfast and even offered Cynthia some, pretending not to notice how unusual kindness that day. Cynthia, however, was restless. Every time he looked away, her eyes darted towards his room door. Later that evening, Tayo stepped out of the house, pretending to take a call. He stayed outside for almost an hour, deliberately giving her the perfect window to make her move. The moment she heard the main door shut, Cynthia ran straight into his room. She searched everywhere, under the bed, inside the wardrobe, even inside his shoes. Finally, in one of his drawers, she found it, the small wooden box. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside lay a golden ring with a black stone that gleamed faintly even in the dim light. Beside it were wads of dollars, diamond cufflinks, and a few pieces of gold jewelry. Cynthia gasped. So it's true, she whispered. This is where his power comes from. She quickly packed everything into her designer handbag, grinning like a cat. Just then, her phone buzzed. It was her boyfriend, who was parked outside her street. Baby, are you ready? He asked as Cynthia told him to meet her by the gate in 10 minutes. I've got everything, she said excitedly as she packed her bags ready to abscond. At exactly 10:30 p.m., Cynthia crept out of the house with her bag clutched tightly. She met her boyfriend outside, and they both hurried into his car. Tayo stood on the balcony and watched as Cynthia made away with the ring. He smiled, knowing what was to come. However, what he did not know was the kind of curse that the ring would unleash upon her. Tayo lived his life happy to be free from the curse, whilst his wife Cynthia traveled to a faraway city with her boyfriend. She decided to wear the ring, hoping to be as wealthy as Tayo, but instead of riches, she ran mad on the spot. Cynthia had no idea that women were prohibited from ever wearing the ring. Her greed blinded her to the possible dangers of venturing into something that she knew nothing about. Her boyfriend ran away from her as she began to roam the streets mad. The ring that once shone like gold now turned dark and dull on her finger. No matter how hard she tried, she could not pull it off. It burned her skin, sending waves of pain through her arm, but it refused to leave her. Within days, she became a shadow of herself, roaming the streets, muttering Tayo's name while people crossed the road to avoid her. Meanwhile, Tayo's peace returned like sunshine after a long storm. The heavy stench that once cursed his mouth left him forever. His confidence returned, but he was no longer the boastful man that he used to be. Tayo had learned humility through pain and vowed never to be proud in his life. The lesson to be learned from this story is that not every blessing comes from God, and not every wealth is worth the price attached to it. Tayo inherited riches wrapped in a curse, and it cost him his peace, confidence, and dignity until he learned the truth. Greed blinded Cynthia so much that she stole what she did not understand, only to inherit the same torment that once destroyed her husband's life. In life, never envy another person's fortune or chase quick wealth, for some treasures shine on the outside, but rot the soul within.